is Prince Archie's birth certificate amended? It has been described as unprecedented, strange, irregular, a mystery. Shortly after his birth, Archie took his place within the line of succession, and Lady C, in her updated version of her book, Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, Persecutors or Victims, informs us how that came about. It was quite simple, really. Harry just made a declaration to the Deputy Registrar. And on the 17th of May, 2019, his son and Meghan's son, Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor, had been born to his wife Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex nee Markle, and himself, His Royal Highness Henry Charles Albert David Duke of Sussex, on the 6th of May 2019 at the Portland Hospital. Now, she goes on to emphasise that a new father in the UK does not have to prove these things, where or when the child was born. He does not need to provide the doctors or hospital records. He does not need to provide the name of any attendant obstetrician, a midwife or nurse. He doesn't have to prove that indeed any medical staff were even present. He doesn't need to prove that the birth took place at the venue that he said it took place. All he has to do is simply provide the Deputy Registrar, in this case, with the information that he did provide when he filled out the form for that birth certificate, whereupon it was accepted as truth and a birth certificate was issued. And that is the same for anyone that actually registers a child's birth in the UK. Now, why is this important? What does it prove? It proves that the process is automatic. It proves that it goes on its own track regardless of anything, unless the only way it could be checked, delayed, prevented is a formal legal intervention. And Lady C makes that point in her book. And for a legal intervention to actually take place, you would need a lot of proof. You would need to be able to prove your case beyond a shadow of a doubt. Because if you couldn't prove that case beyond a shadow of a doubt, then you would wear the fallout for that. And in the case of the royal family, the fallout would have been huge. It would have been just too big a risk to take. Besides, at the time, it is assumed that there wasn't enough factual proof, that there wasn't any indication that could be legally proven that Prince Archie indeed was not born in exactly the way Harry and Meghan claimed. Or was there? I went back to check the reporting at the time, starting with the Times archive, and it was very evident to me that while some journalists subtly hinted that something may be slightly amiss, the prevailing narrative was that any doubts expressed about Meghan and whether she actually carried Archie was the realm of trolls and internet crazies, and indeed that was a headline at the time. The main questions that journalists raised at the time is the title of this video: why was Archie's birth certificate amended and who directed that change? And to date, that has never been answered satisfactorily. It's been a case of the palace said or the Sussexes said, but nothing has been definitively proved either way. They also pointed to the rather strange situation with apparently the palace being completely out of the loop, with their announcement that Meghan had just gone into labour hours after she'd actually got back to Frogmore Cottage with a babe in her arms. So let's look more closely at this amendment and the reaction to it at the time. Now, the original birth certificate had Meghan listed as Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. Now, that was later amended to Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex without the Rachel Meghan bit on the front. Also, there was a slight change with Harry. When he was listed, they put a prince in front of the Harry part. Now, I also went back and looked at Prince Louis's birth certificate because I just wanted to compare it to a normal, transparent, just run-of-the-mill sort of process. Now, Louis's birth certificate did differ from George's and Charlotte's because George's and Charlotte's were handwritten and Louis's was typed, like Archie's was. So there's nothing nefarious in that. It's just that it was typed, which is perfectly acceptable. It can be handwritten or it can be typed. Now, of course, Catherine was listed as Catherine Elizabeth, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge. And interestingly, Prince William signed it. He signed his name William in his own hand, whereas Harry signed Archie's with the typed word Harry, which I found very interesting. Now, Prince William, even though George and Charlotte's was handwritten, he hand-signed it, but with Louis, he also made sure that he hand-signed it William, regardless of the typing that preceded it. Now, in all birth certificates, Catherine is listed as Catherine Elizabeth, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Cambridge, as indeed Archie's originally did with Meghan, Rachel Meghan, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. The only apparent amendment happened 3 weeks later, and there's an argument about why that happened and who actually instigated it. So let's look at this from various angles. Now, if the Sussexes indeed go ahead and amend Prince Archie's birth certificate without any prompting at all from the palace, why did they do it? And I had to think about this, and I thought maybe it was a belated attempt to protect them from the public censure if it came out that Meghan in fact did not carry Archie. They were sort of trying to remove her forenames from the birth certificate so that if there was any formal sort of legal intervention, they would get into less trouble, maybe? Maybe they thought that that would suffice, that would make it more difficult to pursue. I have no idea. If that's the case, of course, it's a complete nonsense. Now, the amendment provoked a big reaction in the press, and many people don't realise that it was actually Lady C that discovered this amendment. Now, she was quoted as saying in various newspapers, "It is extraordinary and raises all kinds of questions about what the Sussexes were thinking." Now, it's pretty much a non-statement, but what it firmly does is attribute the amendment to the Sussexes very, very firmly. Dickie Arbiter, the Queen's former press secretary, said the changes could be an early part of their plan, which is quite, confusing really. What plan? What plan? About Archie, or the plan to ultimately leave the royal family as working members? It's very obscure. I'm not quite sure how to interpret his statement. Ingrid Seward said, "For a royal to change a birth certificate is unprecedented, but to remove forenames is remarkable." Unprecedented and remarkable. And it is for those very reasons that I don't think it was good enough that an anonymous palace source denied being behind the amendment. An anonymous source said to various newspapers at the time, "We indeed were not behind the amendment to Prince Archie's birth certificate," when Meghan made that accusation at a later date. An anonymous palace source. It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough, because I believe this question lies at the heart of the legitimacy of the line of succession. But this is all old news, isn't it? Well, no, actually it's not. There was a recent development in July of 2023, which isn't that long ago. And it was in Yahoo News, where they ran this extraordinary headline, obviously planted by the Sussexes, I would imagine, although it wasn't via Omid Scobie at the time, it's through another journalist. And this is the headline: Buckingham Palace removed Meghan Markle's name from Archie's birth certificate, but it wasn't the same for Kate. Now, that was designed to inflame. It was designed to make people resentful and wary of Catherine, the Princess of Wales, that she was in somehow receiving some sort of favour and Meghan Markle was being bullied by the palace. That was the whole implication of the headline. So like I said, obviously a planted story, and we've seen many of them. But it's interesting, July 2023, because up until March 9th, of 2023, Archie, I nearly said Prince, Archie and Lilibet were actually not referred to as Prince and Princess. It was only post 9th of March 2023 that the Royal Family website was updated and they were referred to as Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet. So, official acknowledgement, March of 2023, and it came about in the usual Sussex way, a preemptive announcement, this time after Lily's christening. It was announced by the couple's spokesperson. They made it very clear that she was christened Princess Lilibet, whereupon the royal family had to update their website. This seems to be a rather pushy pattern, doesn't it? These preemptive announcements. We've seen it so many times before. We saw it with their exit from the UK. We saw it with the announcement of Lilibet's name. We saw a lot of preemptive announcements, and it's always about getting Harry and Meghan exactly what they want, putting pressure on the powers that be that can decide what they want or not. And they sort of try to make it a foregone conclusion by preemptively announcing things. Now, a statement was made by their spokesperson that indeed was not the case, that the palace was very aware that they intended to call their children Prince and Princess, that they were going to take up their birthright. As soon as the Queen died, their ability and their right to call themselves Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet kicked in, because they were the grandchildren of the monarch.